Okay, well, let's get started with today's webinar. I hope you can all hear me okay. We're going to be looking today at digital marketing metrics and measurements. So what we're going to have a look through today is essentially starting off with just the top line. What are we essentially talking about when we're discussing marketing analytics? And then having a look at what the definitive metrics are for traffic and user engagement, and what are the best metrics that you can be using for your website to get the most out of your customers and to optimize your revenue. Following from this, touching on using data to monetize web traffic. So essentially what we'll be looking at there is when you're getting a lot of web traffic, or if you've got some certain goals that you're kicking, what do you do then to make sure that you're maximizing your revenue and getting the best possible outcome for your website? We'll be going on there to touch on retention and customer loyalty. So essentially in here we'll be looking at what we can do once we've got our customers through the door, our target audience, to keep them through, to keep them converting, and to upsell them where possible. We'll then be looking at how we can leverage some of that data for sales, and then having a look at how we attribute marketing channels, with having a look at a range of the different attribution models that are provided to us. So starting off with what is marketing analytics and what we're discussing through in here. And we're looking here to have a look at the act of measuring the steps and touch points to lead to the increased value of a user on a website. So essentially, when we're having a look here, it's really important that we start with where marketing initially came from and what it was starting out in a traditional aspect, and where we're looking at now. So the then was all about, looking for the customers with a big, almost like a big carpet bomb type approach. So throwing out as many bits of marketing material to a wide range of audience, and then hoping the people in that part of the audience will fit the target market that you're going after. And that's something that we see a lot with TV and radio placements as well, where we're going really above the line, trying to reach as many people as possible, and then hoping that there's people in that audience that fit our target market. It's now more about being found, and because now that we're online and that things are much more targeted, we can interact with people straight away at that very point. A really important thing to note here as well is the change from demographic data to behavioral segmentation. So this is something that we'll discuss in greater depth throughout the webinar, but essentially what we're looking at here is how we moved from having a look at things like your location and your age and gender, to having a look really at what you're doing. So looking more at the implicit data that's provided to us rather than the explicit data. Cool. So I wanted to start off very quickly just having a look at the marketing funnel. Now I'm sure the marketing funnel is something that we've all seen before, and having a look at some of the different ways that a marketing funnel can look. It's not always that perfect one that we have in the bottom right corner of the good persuasion and good conversion. There's ways that it can be thrown out of line somewhat. For example, in the top one we have an example where we're really reaching a lot of people. This could be something where we're doing a lot of above the line advertising, whether that be television or radio, or we're spending a lot on display marketing, but we've just got the wrong placements. And through here we can see that the acquisition funnel is very wide. We're reaching a lot of people, but unfortunately they're not trickling through into the conversions. So we're spending a lot of our marketing budget getting our name out there, but it looks like we're getting in front of the wrong people. And that really is converse in another way that we can have a look at it, where we've got good targeting, but the persuasion is ineffective, where we're reaching the right people, we get them through to a step where they think, well, this is a product or a service that I might be interested in going further, but we just can't make that final step from getting them into potentially a newsletter subscriber into an actual paying customer. And then there's ways that we'll have to look at that in terms of how we market to those customers differently as well. The optimal goal, though, is the one that we've got on the bottom right, where we've got good persuasion. We're looking at the right type of people, and we're able to trickle them through in all of the different steps. Obviously, there's always going to be a drop-off when we're moving from acquisition through to conversion, but as we can see, it's a lot more streamlined there and a lot more balanced. So what is digital analytics useful for? So there's a range of things that we're using our analytics for every day, and I'm sure a lot of you who are using tools such as Semrush would know so much about what we need to do in terms of measuring data, measuring things on our website, what's going on, and how we can look to make adjustments based on those findings. So some of the key things that we're going to be looking at is finding the problems with your website so you can fix them and increase your conversions. Killing bad digital media buys or marketing strategies. So essentially when we're spending a lot of money on certain channels, having a look then through into our source data in Google Analytics or Kissmetrics or whatever tool we might be using and working out that it's not quite working for us the way that we'd like it to. Developing a digital marketing strategy that works, so having a look at what strategies are working, what channels are working, optimizing them, getting the most out of them, understanding the pain points in your customer life cycle as well. So understanding, essentially having a look back at the funnel we looked at before. What are the areas in there that we're losing our customers, and what can we do to make sure that enough of our customers are funneling through each of the different cycles? How to improve your leads to customer process, which is a really important one as well. Essentially, if we're getting a lot of leads through the door, are they becoming paying customers, or have we just incentivized them in another way? Are we targeting them in the wrong way? Are we giving too much away early? Creating returning visitors and purchases, and also predicting marketing outcomes, which is an important one when we start to look at maybe we've reached our maximum impressions that we can on our AdWords campaigns, and we have to think, well, what can I do to have a look at some other avenues for getting people through the door that might not look straight away as being as performance based and cost effective, but if we can have a look at how we've performed potentially with some of our other mediums that we've tried over time, we can make good with those and potentially find some new ways to spend our marketing budgets as well. Okay, so what we're going to first be looking at are some definitive metrics and measuring essentially what really matters in marketing analytics. So what is a metric first up? So when we're talking about a metric, it's essentially a measure of the relationship between one or more numbers generated by your website or customers. So you don't need hundreds of metrics, and that's something that I think is really important throughout. A lot of people go out and they see so many things, in their Google Analytics account or in their Kissmetrics account, or there's so many bits of data being thrown at them, and they're trying to measure crazy things that just mean absolutely no sense to them and make no sense to be tracking. So it's really important that, especially if you're time poor and you work in a smaller team, that you're just focusing on what the good metrics are, focusing on those, aligning them with the goals of your business as well. We want to make sure that we measure your key metrics regularly. I think it's good at least once a week to have a recap of how everything's performing, benchmark it against the last week, and then potentially looking at month on month, quarter on quarter, and year on year as well as we get a bit bigger. Focus your effort towards making good metrics and automating them as well. So once we know what our key metrics are, what can we do then to just constantly have those filtering in week in so that we're not having to go back, pull the same reports each time, export the data, crunch it in Excel, and export it back out. So having a look at what we can do to automate that process and make sure that we're only having a look at the key ones. Once we need to dig deeper, that is readily available for us as well. Then having a look at building the metrics for specific business goals, which we've touched on just before, but it's really important. Some of the good examples there are having a look at customer acquisition, which for an early stage startup is such an important thing like ours. Having a look at revenue, which is obviously the driver of any key business. And there's a few other ones that we might want to have a look through in there as well. It might be things like user engagement, subscriptions. There's a lot there that we can have a look at, but they're really going to base depending on your business. So starting out, we're going to be having a look at, this is the Dave McClure, the serial entrepreneur Dave McClure, the 500 Startups. Dave McClure, having a look at his way of essentially encapsulating the key things that any startup business or essentially any website tech business needs to have a look at. These are the key metrics to beginning with, and they're known as the pirate metrics essentially because they say, it's the metrics funnel diagram that we've got through in here. The key ones that we're looking at through here is acquisition. So at the very top, how do those users essentially find us from the get-go? Activation, do those users have a great first user experience? Are they being engaged with what you're talking about? Have you been able to present a new topic to them or teach them something? Retention, do those users then come back and look again? Revenue, how do we then make money off those people who are coming back again and again? And then the ultimate one there is the referral, so that word of mouth. Are people then going out, once they've had that touch point, they're customers of ours, are they telling their friends and their family and their co-workers about us? And do those users then tell others as well? Okay, so one thing that we want to have a look at there is having a look at some very basic metrics to begin with, and these are some of the things that I'm sure a lot of you have seen from time to time. Starting off first with unique customers. So ensuring that when we're having a look at the unique customers, that we're essentially looking at the unique customers. We're not having a look at sessions, we're having a look focused on users as well. And what you'll find is there's been a lot of looking into exactly what is calculated as a unique user over time as well. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, I can take you through the actual configuration that needs to be done to ensure that that's in place and that you're getting the right calculation there on your users. The next is unique visitors as well. So that's essentially the sessions and how many times your pages are being visited, the visits throughout the day, the bounce rate. So essentially we know the bounce rate is the people coming on, how many of them are then going to drop off. And this is something that doesn't get touched on enough from an organic search perspective as well. But bounce rate is more and more so becoming, if you're having a look at any of the recent reports that are popping up on Search Engine Land and Moz and whatnot, they're finding that more and more that the bounce rate and that user engagement criteria is becoming so important for your on-page search engine optimization as well. So it's something that you're really going to note for both, your landing pages, but then also for your search. Having a look at entry and exit pages, which is really important for understanding what are the parts of our website that people are first entering and what are the parts where we're losing them, where are they dropping off. New versus returning, which is really important, I think, as the business grows. I think it's good, ultimately, once you've got an established business running, I think you need to aim for about a 60-40 split between your new versus your returning. You always want to try and have more new users coming through the door, but at the same time, you don't want to, lose those visitors that you've had, especially if they're, you've got quite a niche product and they're part of your target market. The last thing you want to be able to do is having to acquire these niche users once again. So you want to look, I think, at about a 60-40 split between your new versus returning users. Again, it's going to depend on your product, but that's something that you're going to be looking at. So you've got quite a sticky product, but at the same time, there's still new users coming through the door. And mobile versus desktop visits. So having a look at those browsers and the device and determining, are you ready for mobile? Is there a need for a mobile optimized site? And we've seen that there's been algorithm changes in Google recently that have affected this as well, so that more and more, especially for people, mobile users, that they're not going to be able to see your web page results and that you will get dropped down in those rankings if you don't have that mobile optimized site good and ready to go. And that's something just to keep in mind, especially with your web analytics as well. If people can't purchase on their mobile devices for your product, then you're really missing out on a great deal of customers a lot of the time. Okay, have a look at some more advanced metrics through in here as well, where we're looking at things like conversion rate by device versus browser. So having a look at what problems we can potentially find in web applications. I know here in Australia, one of the big problems that we have is that a lot of government organisations are still on very ancient versions of Internet Explorer, IE6, IE7, which causes a lot of problems then for these new HTML5 websites. They have difficulties with JavaScript as well. So it's ensuring that, across all of the browsers, across all of the operating systems, that you are able to purchase and convert. So that, there's a lot of testing that needs to be involved into that as well to ensure that that is the case. Visitor flow analysis, so having a look at where your customers are first finding those pages, but then also dropping off. Visitor segmentation by purpose of visit. So for example, if someone visits your jobs page, which is something that comes up time and time again, are they really a potential customer? Should you be having a look at excluding them or including them in other measures to ensure that you're not losing track of your main focuses, which is getting people onto your money pages? And another important thing, which is becoming more and more important, is to remove visits from either your internal staff, your agencies, and anyone else who isn't a customer. So we see there's a lot of those web spam referrers that are coming up now and again. We've got social share buttons, SE Molt. There's a range of them that come up through in there as well. So it's making sure that we're putting filters into our analytics accounts to ensure that these aren't coming up and really throwing out our metrics, particularly on things like bounce rate. because generally a lot of these web spam sites, they'll come to your site, they'll bounce straight away, which is really going to fire up your bounce rate quite quickly. So it's important to make sure that you're having a look at your referring sources of traffic. If you're seeing any there that look sus and that you might want to have a look into, that you're removing them and filtering them out. Okay, so where to start? When we're getting started with all this, I'm going to tie this back to those pirate metrics that we had a look at before, the acquisition, activation, retention, referral, and revenue, and having a look at how this might relate to a user status, essentially a metric through in here as well. So from an acquisition start, it might be that they visit our website, potentially on a landing page that we've pushed through from an AdWords campaign or a Facebook CPC campaign, or it could potentially be from an external widget as well if we're doing any type of affiliate marketing. The conversion rate there and the estimated values, so that's starting at quite low. We've got 100% of those people through, and this is where it's going to drop off with that conversion rate, so that they don't abandon, which will be the first thing, so that they're not bouncing straight away, that they're viewing a certain amount of pages based on what we think would be a good active user. And this again is really going to depend on what type of service you're offering. In this particular example, we're having a look at that. They've viewed 2 or more pages, they've stayed on for more than 10 seconds, and they've had at least 2 clicks. The estimated value of that and the percentage of that, as you can see, will continue to drop. Then we're having a look from there to activation. So that's really going to depend on how that experience was with their first touch point of your website. If they've had a happy first visit, they view a certain amount of pages, they'll stay for a certain amount of time, and they've had a certain amount of clicks, really based on what you'd expect a customer to do, what you've seen historically from what leads to converting customers as well. So this might take a bit of time to go back and have a look at a few of your frequency reports in Google Analytics or KISS metrics or whatever tool you're using. And as you can see there, that this continues to drop. Having a look then at email, blog, RSS signup, so having a look if they're actually going through then and becoming a newsletter subscriber or an email subscriber. And this is such a key metric through in here. You can see how much the conversion rate drops there, but this is when you've really got a customer on board. This is when you can really start to remarket them. You've captured someone who hopefully is part of your target audience and then can lead to a potential customer. Account sign up again continues to drop. Then when we start to have a look into our retention customers, who are the repeat visitors who are opening our emails and they're clicking through to our emails, they're responsive with everything that we're doing. These are the type of guys that we want. As we can see, the conversion rate continues to drop with these guys as well. And then the referral, so who are the type of people who are referring users to our website? These ones start to become really valuable as well, especially when they're referring users who then become active users, guys that we can then say, you know, they've come directly from this source. This is a good source of person. What can we do to optimize referrals in the future? Is there an affiliate program that we might consider running as well? Then having a look at the revenue, so how much revenue the user is generating. They might start up with a minimum revenue, and that conversion rate obviously is going to be higher. And then when they have a look at generating break-even revenue, hopefully then into profitable revenue as well, and you can see that the value of that continues to increase. So the metrics really change depending on what stage of these cycle that we're part of these pirate metrics. And the more that we can do to get people through each of those flows, from acquisition to activation, then hopefully through into revenue as well. So one place to start when we're looking to set up, and this is something that doesn't get touched on too much, however, it's something that I think can be quite valuable, is having a look at the Google Analytics Solutions Gallery. I think this is a really good place to start when you're first learning a bit about Google Analytics, and you want to know essentially what are the key metrics that businesses maybe similar to yours are using to benchmark their data, to have a look at how things are going, and then potentially using one of these templates and customizing it to your own. So if you have a look in Google Analytics, you'll be able to find the Solutions Gallery, or you can just Google it and have a look through the different reports that are in there. So there's some really good reports, particularly around having a look at organic search, long tail keywords, and how they're, how the visits are coming through, how the bounce rates are, how long tail versus short tail and medium tail, how the conversion rates are comparing there as well. So there's some interesting reports that you can pull out of the solutions gallery. Some good ones on social media as well, so it's really worth having a look at those to get started. You can go into any of those and edit as well and see the types of conditions that they've set on those reports, if there's something there that you potentially might look to change as well. Frequency is something that comes up in these reports a lot. Really good for setting out what you consider to be a retained user and an active user as well. Whether that's 3 visits, 3 returning visits, you can set them all up through in these dashboard reports, and these ones are good to start with as a benchmark. And finally, having a look through in here is at analytics segments. So segments are something that I think are really, really underused. I know particularly in the Australian market, that I think it's something that every digital marketer should be using on their Google Analytics account. It's a great way of being able to have a look at those key metrics that we've touched on before, and having a look at what we can do to segment a certain part, isolate a certain part of our audience, and see how they're reacting with those key metrics versus another part of our market. So as an example, we could set up a segment that has a look at potentially purely on email marketing, how our email marketing traffic compares with some of those key metrics, activation rates, conversion rates, bounce rates, but then having a look, more at demographical and user behavior as well, behavioral flows as well. All the parts of Google Analytics, essentially having a look and isolating that particular part, whether that's behavioral or demographical, of your data. So it's a great way of having a look and being able to make some different types of assumptions based on maybe some really key users or some users that maybe you potentially think aren't quite as important as well. It's a great way also of being able to find out if there's some users that are really skewing the rest of your metrics as well. If you're finding potentially maybe, I know an example recently with a website that I was working on where the ladies' website was getting a lot of direct traffic from Perth, which was bouncing straight away. It was a building company, a building inspections company that was based out of Sydney, and what she was finding was there was a lot of direct traffic from Perth bouncing straight away. What she found out was the name of her company, where she had the website, was the exact same as a really famous restaurant in Perth. So once we were able to find out that and see that there was all of this bounce traffic that was coming through from Perth, it was a great opportunity then to create some segments, to create some filters as well, to make sure that we're having a look at the right type of audience for her and where she really wants to be having a look at those key metrics. Okay, and the last thing to have a look at with web analytic metrics is the testing. So we want to make sure that we're deciding on a optimization platform, so something that we can look to have, potentially benchmark a few of these metrics, things like bounce rates, conversion rates, pages, average pages per visit. And using these tools such as Optimizely is a great tool, for example, to get started, where we can set out and say, I want to have a look at a particular part of my website that I think I could do a little bit better with, or I want to try something out with. Maybe it's, it could be something as simple as the color of your call to action button. It could be, having maybe a personal call to action versus an impersonal call to action. It could be anything to do with, layout and size as well, as long as it's something that we can clearly test and see, what the difference between one versus the control is, then it's something that we should definitely have a look at. And it's really important that when we're having a look at these tools that we're also setting goals as well. So making sure that if we're using something like an Optimizely, that those, we're setting it as a goal, whether it's, a conversion or whether it's through a newsletter sign up or whatever it might be, to ensure that we're getting the best results for that. We can look to optimize that. Once we've found out what's working best for us, let's go and change that, test something else, and revisit. Okay, so we're going to have a look now at what we can do to use some of the data that's provided to us in either our Google Analytics account or potentially in our email database or in our CRM, and using that data to monetize the web traffic that we have. So to be starting with here and here, the first thing I wanted to have a look at was, if you've got a website, and this is something that happens a lot, is where a user has a website where they're getting a fair bit of traffic. Maybe they've put together a good report, or they've done some great content marketing, or they've got a good name out there, whatever it might be, where they're getting a lot of people onto the website, but they're not actually being able to convert those users into paying customers. And this is just a really first step. What I'd be doing as 3 key steps to get started, and one thing to look at is your authenticity. So one thing to consider is, how authentic is the service that I'm offering? How does it, if I was, a regular Joe, how would I know that it was something that I need to use based on, user reviews or case studies or testimonials that other people similar to me with similar pain points to what I have, this tool is being used to get them through those particular pain points. So the displaying of user reviews is such a key thing, and testimonials as well. If you can put together a case study as well, anything like that will really build up the authenticity and help build that trust with your customer to hopefully then convert through into that sale. Security is such a big thing as well. I know particularly in Australia this becomes a big thing with people are very wary to hand over their credit card details or their payment details or even their email address to a website that they've never heard about and has no type of trust, where they can't see that there's SSLs or whatnot working behind the scenes. So anything that you can do to build that trust, whether it's something like a very signed trusted tick of approval, or whether you're using a secure gateway such as PayPal for your transactions, will really help you again to build those people who are getting to your site but maybe don't have that trust quite with your website yet. And the herd mentality as well is such an important thing, and it's something that you can see a lot of the big websites using, particularly things like Basecamp's one thing that I see use this time and time again. So what Basecamp will do is they'll set up every day and they'll say, look at how many customers we've had come through and use our service today, subscribe for our service today, and it might be like 6,000 customers have come through and used Basecamp today. So it's building up that herd mentality, saying, well, look, there's so many people going through in here and using this service. Is this something that I want to be a part of and get involved with as well? And one thing you can do really for that as well is getting those featured with. If you've got any type of features, if you had any type of PR, potentially maybe your service is being used by somebody that's got a big name, got those credentials, make sure you're getting those permissions, obviously, to use these first, but having those, they're like stamps of approval, essentially. If you can get any of the big names, the likes of, your TechCrunches and your Yahoo, Forbes, any local publications as well, who have featured you, getting those names on there to say, hey, these are guys that have come along, they've reviewed our service, they've used our service, follow, and they love to have people essentially make those tough decisions for them. Okay, and one thing to consider before we're even getting started with any of this is making sure that whatever we're doing, that we're testing, so that we're using one of those testing tools that we have available, whether it's Optimizely, potentially maybe having a look at setting up an unbounce page as well, which makes you able to drag and drop and create squeeze pages. But we want to make sure that everything that we're doing, that we're testing it and having a look at how it's affecting our key metrics. Again, how is it affecting our bounce rate? How is it affecting our unique visits onto the pages? How is it affecting our average pages per visit? Having a look at those key metrics that we've set up previously and thinking, how is anything that I'm going to be doing to look to monetize my site a little bit more? How is it going to affect it? So one thing that comes up time and time again is how counterintuitive test results can seem. And I'm sure anyone who's done any type of web testing or email testing, content testing, has found this before, that you generally come in with a hypothesis, and it seems a lot of the time that a hypothesis gets completely disproved with some data that can be completely counterintuitive to you. So, I mean, I know, for example, when I was first starting out in digital marketing, that I was always told that red buttons were a big no-no, especially if there's something to do with, for a payment page or a sign-up page, because red, it has that symbolic meaning behind it, where we associate it with stopping. It's something that, I tested at a previous company that I worked on with an email, where we started using red buttons as opposed to a blue button, and we found that the red buttons were actually really eye-catching, building a lot more click-throughs through to them and actually increasing the conversions as well. So something as simple as that we need to test these things and make sure that, we're not coming in with any type of biases to begin with. And we want to assume nothing, as I've said there, and make sure that we learn really fast as well. So there's something that's not working. There's no point hypothesis that we had. If we can see that it's clearly not working, look, we're probably going to end up doing a lot of damage to ourselves in the long run if we're not looking to then change it and look to try something a little bit different. And if you can't make an improvement, make sure you go back to what was performing the best before. So making sure that you've got that evergreen piece of content or that layout or whatever it is, your evergreen landing page that's the best performing, that you want to make sure that you've kept, so that when you're finding out that these experiments aren't working, that you've been able to go back to that and start again. Okay, and so where it all really starts for me when customers are first, is capturing their email address. And I think email is something that, it's such an important channel. And sometimes, people come up and say, email is less and less important. It's such a saturated market nowadays. But it's one of the few channels that you actually have complete control over with your customers, and that you'll be able to, consistently market through to them. It's not something that you're reliant on things like, algorithms, for example, like Google is, or edge rank algorithms, like you are with Facebook. It's something that you always will have that control over. So whatever you can do to capture as many emails of your target audience as possible, strategy provided with that as well. So some of the two really simple ways, if you've got a lot of website traffic coming through and you're looking to monetize, is thinking, what can I do to get more customers subscribed to my email list? Two really simple things to start with would be to have a look at setting up a pop-up or an overlay. Some people find these quite intrusive, although from experience they are very effective as well. It's something that you should definitely have a look at testing, see how it is affecting things like your bounce rate, and especially your average page views per visit as well, seeing how it's impacting that and if it's something that people are finding too intrusive. But in the right context, and if you have something that really appeals to people, it can work quite well. So here's an example of an e-commerce store where it's 40% off your first order if you just enter in the email address through in there. And they've also got down through on the bottom one of those great personal messages where they said, no thanks, I prefer to pay the full price. So it's almost a bit of reverse psychology there as well, really encouraging people to go through then and to get the 40% off their first order and subscribing to the email. A subscribe bar is a really simple way to get started if you want to keep an email form on your pages without being overly intrusive. It's something that can be installed with something like Hello Bar, or I know there's a WordPress plugin, I think it's Viper Bar, that gets used for setting that up as well, where you can have a simple subscribe bar in the top of your page to ensure that you're not missing out on any potential subscribers. So two things to consider if we're having a look at building and getting more emails as well is, first off, having a look at potentially gating some of our content as well. Do we have potentially an evergreen source, maybe it's an ebook or something that's being downloaded, where constantly it's getting downloaded, it's getting viewed, and there could be a potential for people to provide their details for it because it's become so viable, or it's something that you're creating that you believe will become that viable as well. So perhaps you've put together, a really great series of blog posts, and you're thinking, well, what can I do I've had a lot of visitors on those blog posts, what can I do to ensure that I'm getting the most out of those blog posts that I can? And could potentially look to put together maybe a PDF ebook of those blog posts where they're all in a guide, nicely presented, and you're actually capturing in those user details for that as well. This is an example of gated content where you're capturing that email address for a free download. And it's really important, I think, as well, when we're doing any of this, you got to make sure that you're providing genuine value. There's no need for somebody to subscribe to your email list if you just say to them, subscribe and get the best deals or whatever it might be. It's got to have something that I think is a really specific offering. So for example, here's an example of Noah Kagan from OKDork. He also runs AppSumo, where he's got 85% of my best business hacks are available if you subscribe to my email list, where he's got clearly setting out what are the things that you're going to be able to acquire if you're subscribing through in there, what the benefit is to you, and hopefully then with him providing that genuine value, you'll go on and to subscribe. So essentially this is having a look now. If we've captured a couple of email addresses and we've got a little bit of data on our customers and they're still potentially not converting, which is something that will happen from time to time, but maybe we haven't captured the right type of users, maybe we don't know enough about these users to know how to market them as well. So one thing that we consider through in here is having a look at, this should be implicit versus explicit. So implicit is our first one over here, which is data that will be intentionally provided. So explicit data, is the data that's intentionally provided. So an example of the explicit data would be if you're using something like Facebook Connect, where you're capturing a lot of information from a customer from a first hand. It potentially could be something like the iPad ad that I've got there. So this is something that I ran when I was at a company called Spreets. And what we did was we were looking to make sure that we got as much information about our customers as possible, because we were finding the more information we had on those customers, the more we could, market to them better and give them closer deals to them, where we had their postcodes, we could give them gender-specific deals, and we could also tailor things based on their interests. So what we did was we ran a simple update your details for a chance to win an iPad competition. So all the customer had to do was go through into their account, update a few of the key details, which were, their gender, their date of birth, their postcode, their telephone number. Once they added in those details, that's obviously more data than that we have our hands on to be able to market to those customers, and then they were incentivized to do that as well. So it's not going to, bring every customer back through to do that, but it's a great way of being able to bring back a few and gives you a good idea of what else you can do to incentivize customers to get more information out of them. So SurveyMonkey is another one as well, which works on the same type of principles. Essentially, if you're running a type of survey where you're looking to get set bits of data on your customers, you can then use that data into funnel back and have a look at potentially your marketing strategies as well on how you're acquiring customers, but also will give you a good idea of the type of customers that you've already acquired, maybe what industry they're from, how many employees they have. It could be, again, those demographical bits of information that you potentially weren't capturing from that initial email sign up. So it's a great way of, if you've got a customer through the door early, being able to then update the rest of their details once you've got that key bit of data, which of course is their email address. Okay, so the next one we're having a look at here is meant to be implicit, which is behavioral data. And so essentially this is data that we create and that we construe based on what our customers are doing and what we're finding our customers to be doing as well. So this is a really great way of being able to see, once we've got those customers through the door, what are the type of actions that they're taking? Are they being really active with our emails? Are they responding to emails? Are they coming back to our website? What are the differences between a customer who we've got subscribed versus a customer who we haven't got an email address for yet? So little things like that, and having a look at how they compare and looking at more and more what we can get out of those customers. So of course we know in Google Analytics that there's that demographical information that we can grab from a customer as well, that's based on those display and the content, the Google Display Network placements as well. So we can start to get a little bit more of an understanding then of the customers, their gender, what their interests are, their average age ranges as well. And then in something like an Eloqua, which is a marketing automation tool, then we can potentially have a look at really more granular type of things where, what pages are those customers visiting? Are they, putting things into their cart, then dropping off? What are the actions that they're taking? What are the points that, the pain points that they're still having? And where are they, being really active? So maybe, potentially, once they're subscribed, they're downloading a certain ebook, and that ebook might be on a particular product or aligned with a particular product that you have, then there might be a great opportunity then to email out and try and market to them that product to get hopefully a sale coming out of that as well. Okay, so what's next? Once we've had a look at all of these points of the data, we want to consider the ways that we'll be able to monetize based on some of the, what are the real key benefits and the key things that we have going for our website. So one of the first things to have a look at would be a large social following. So I'll give you a bit of background on myself, and one thing that I've done a bit of work on throughout my time is having a look at particularly Facebook pages and monetizing more viral type nature Facebook pages. So some of the key metrics that you can have a look at for those are obviously your followers, but more and more these days with the changes that Facebook's made to their algorithms is the reaches and the engagement, and this is going to apply to all of your social channels as well. Once we know what those are, we can have a look at our monetization strategy and have a look at how viable this product is as well. There could be the potential to run a giveaway on these type of channels, and that's a great way of being able to build word of mouth and hopefully build in a bit of referral traffic as well. One thing we could also look at through in there is affiliate links as well, potentially looking to sell different types of products based on what our social following is. If it's around our particular products, then maybe we want to obviously just sell our own products on the back of that. But if we're a part of a niche, or maybe we're an example of this might be if maybe you do something with animals, maybe you run a page about cute huskies or whatever it might be. There might be an opportunity then to sell on a product that really relates to that target audience using an affiliate link, and to get a clip of that ticket as well. So if we're getting high traffic as well, we want to have a look at some of the key metrics. Obviously, there are those unique visitors, and having a look at what our high traffic pages are. What are the pages that are getting those hits? And then obviously having a look at the bounce rate too, which is going to have a key part of how we're able to monetize that traffic. So a monetization strategy we could look at with these guys is obviously AdSense, so where we're actually running advertisements on our own website and getting paid by Google through those impressions, and then potentially with affiliate links as well. So if there's a particular product maybe that we're writing about, it could be a great opportunity to add in a few affiliate links and look to get people to purchase those so that we're getting paid for those. Engaged users is one that comes up more and more so in my particular target market, where we're looking in Australia, and this is where we're having a look at people who there's not always a great deal of traffic. It could be a lot smaller, but it's highly specific, and it's a really engaged group of users. So having a look at things like the time on the site, the pages per visit, potentially if we've got accounts with them as well, how many logins they're doing per week or per month, or when the last time they logged in was as well. If this is the case, there could be a great opportunity then to offer sponsored content for people who fit around those niches as well. So that could be a great way of being able to say, hey, I've got a really, maybe I run a women in business network, and I say, well, I've got a really highly targeted group of users, and if you're wanting to look to push content through my channels, I'm happy for you to provide some content for a small fee. And then also, obviously, affiliate links will play into that as well. But I think ultimately the big one there is the sponsored content piece. Large email databases, which is always a good tool to have, especially if you've got a very engaged database where you've got high open rates, high click-through rates, and that your unsubscribes and churn rates aren't too high, and also the deliverability. So that's always one thing to have a look at as well, to ensure that your emails are getting through into the inbox. So potentially running things like domain reports on those as well, having a look at what your leading domain providers are and email providers are, and making sure that those emails are hitting the inbox. But the monetization strategies they're quite endless really, but the key ones to have a look at there would potentially be running newsletter ads, where people are paying just generally for that particular placement and an upfront fee, and then also products as well. Okay, so next thing we're going to have a look at through in here is customer loyalty and retention. So what we can do to bring customers back again, and making sure that we're getting them back each time. So one thing that I put through in here that I think is a really a great quote that I came up before in the community building guide. And for any of you who haven't seen that, I really recommend having a look through it. It's a great guide for having a look at what you can do to build up a little community of users, whether that's a forum or for a particular tool, and what you can do to keep them engaged, keep them coming back, and making sure that you've got the right people in your community for that maximum engagement. And so the quote through in here was that the worst mistake you can make is building an audience without having any way to reach it again, which I think is such a key thing. It's something that small businesses particularly struggle with, where they get their good customers through the door who might come back once, but then they completely lose them. So we want to make sure that once our good customers come through, the ones that we spent that money acquiring, that we're getting them back repeating purchases and upselling at a cost-effective rate to us. So generally you'll find that once you've got a customer through the door, to re-engage them it costs between 4 and 10 times less than what it would be to bring a brand new customer through the door. So some of the metrics we're going to have a look at around retention would be, of course, our existing customers metric, our reacquisition costs as well, so what the cost would be to get a customer to then convert again, so how much you're willing essentially to spend to save a customer, the email list sustainability as well, so what is the monthly in and out of subscribers. This is a really important thing to note if you are doing a lot of email sends as well. If you're doing too many sends, you might be losing subscribers faster than you're actually acquiring new users through. And then you might want to have a look at then if you've got an average rate of the average value of a subscriber, then considering what the lost revenue each year for those subscribers is to ensure that your email marketing strategy isn't being too bombarding and it's something that you're able to manage and sustain. What the upsell rate is as well, so used to calculate the effectiveness of your remarketing. So once you've got those customers through the door, what percentage of them we're able to bring into repeat purchases. And then the three key ones with any retention marketing strategy are RFM, which is the recency of the customer, so how recent the customer has been, how warm of a lead they are, the frequency as well, how many touch points they've had through with you, and the monetary value, so what value you can get from those customers. And one thing that's really important when we're having a look at any type of retention marketing and customer loyalty is segmentation. Segmentation is something that I've done with countless different organizations that I've been involved with. I'm sure a lot of you use it as well. It really depends on how granular you want to get, but it involves dividing up customers based on the provided dimensions that you set out. And again, this should really be aligned with your business goals. We want to make sure that it allows for the maximum relevancy and personalization as well, to ensure that the customers in our segments are getting the messages that we want them to receive. And we can also incorporate implicit and explicit behavior into those segments. So what we're talking about there is we can add in bits of demographical information versus behavioral information in there as well. So we can have maybe it's a segment of users who come from maybe, I don't know, Paris, who have opened our emails within the last 30 days, whatever it might be. We can use those different bits of data, tie them together to get a segment that really suits our marketing goals and what we're doing. So one thing that we really want to consider there as well is prioritizing these based on those goals and metrics, but then also I think it's really important to keep those segments as exclusive as you possibly can. So what I mean by that is that there's not users that are blending in between those segments. Each user has a set segment that they're a part of. Maybe you then need to prioritize parts of your data to ensure that that's the case, but you want to make sure that there's not one customer who's in 6 segments who's getting 6 different messages because they're part of those 6 different segments. So what I wanted to show you here was I spent a lot of time working in the online gaming industry as a retention executive, and essentially what we did was a great deal of segmentation of our customers to ensure that they're receiving offers that are hyper relevant to them for one, but then also ensuring that we're getting the maximum return from those customers' engagement with them as well. So this is something that was set up as this is essentially, think of this as an online wagering and betting example that we've got through in here. So the first segment that we have through in there is activation, and in this particular example, activation means a customer that's signed up but hasn't done anything since signing up. First thing we want to have a look at there is breaking that up between the particular the days of the sign up. So that's the first bit of data that we're going to use, is that sign up date. And then we have, you can see through in there's 3 different offers. So for the ones within the 7 days, they have campaign 1, 7 to 14, campaign 2, campaign 3. So how it worked when I was working in online wagering is we'd set a lot of these up as emails, but then if we found out that there was a customer, we knew there was a particular point in which we really lost them and they became a cold lead, it could be an opportunity then to give them over to an outbound sales team to actually give them a call and work out what we can do to get them over the line and make sure that they're back in our active segments. So then we had an active no bet segment as the next one. So these are customers that have deposited but actually haven't then placed a bet. So we want to treat them with a bit of a separate message because, you know, they haven't actually made that, they've made that first step of, you know, putting their credit card down and whatnot. Now it's about getting them actually to create a behavior to get them really, you know, sticky with the product and engaging with the product so that they're coming back to use it again and again. And then through in here we have a value tier for this example. So the value tier is having a look at how much they actually went on to deposit in that time. So we want to treat the value of the ones who deposited more in this example versus the ones who deposited less. And this all, you know, this all forms part of our having a look at how we profile these customers as well. So if we can see that the customer's, you know, spending a lot of money, then we want to make sure that we're marketing them differently to a customer who might only be spending, you know, $10 or whatnot. Retention involved in this particular example was when we had a customer who was active at that current time, and we wanted to make sure that they continue to be active. So you can see through in there that the time since their last bet was a little bit different. We had 0 to 14 days and 14 to 28 days. There were the 2 value tiers in there as well. And in this particular example, they were served different campaigns, but look, that's really going to be dependent on the type of offering that you are providing. So then reactivation, these are all, again, remembering they're mutually exclusive. These were customers between the 28 to 45 days. So these were customers that we started to lose a little bit, that hadn't been engaged with the product after a certain amount of time. And then we might potentially want to look at marketing them with a different offer. So maybe saying something more along the lines like "we miss you" or whatnot, or maybe providing a bit of more of an incentive to get them back because we know that once we have them in, that they're a better value customer. And then one thing that we're starting to take into consideration with these ones as well is balance. So one thing that we found when we were working in online wagering was that a lot of people would actually leave money in their accounts and not realize it. And one of the great ways that we'd be able to get them back and using their accounts and getting engaged with the product again was sending them a reminder, just simply as an email most of the time, of, hey, you've got a certain amount of money in your account, ensure that you're using it. Here are some of the great specials that are on at this particular time. Once we'd lost them through in there, we could then potentially look to win them back in the final step, which was the win back. So these were the guys that were quite cold. And again, our marketing for these guys would potentially look at being a bit different again. We might look at, you know, giving them a bit more of an incentive. Maybe it might be to give them something up front as well. But we want to make sure that for each of these guys that the response is a little bit different based on those behaviors that we have on those customers to ensure that we're not losing them over time and that we're getting them back into what our business goals are. Okay, so I want to have a look and touch on lead and customer nurturing now as well, which can be a really great and cheap way of being able to acquire more revenue. And one thing that is generally comes out of a lead nurturing process is that the customers generally already aware of what your brand is, and you're looking to educate them a little bit more on your products, become a little bit more product specific, and really to push yourself as that thought leader, which is such an important thing through in here. So if you've got, maybe you're selling, maybe it's an email marketing tool, for example, and you really want to push yourself as that thought leader and saying, you know, these are some benchmark reports that we've run. You want to be in front of those customers each time, so that every time that they're thinking about email marketing, thinking, oh, I really need to, you know, get a new tool for that or update the tool that I've got, that you're at the front of their mind. And that's all through pushing that thought leadership through these lead nurturing processes. So the first thing you can do with these is to build, they really should be automated. It's not something that you want to be running back and back with each different customer. You want to set some delays in the time. So once a customer comes through, you set up a little workflow for them to go through, you build an automated campaign based off those behavior, and then you test different versions. So there might be an email in there that you're not particularly sure of. Maybe you're not sure if you want to really go for that real direct response email straight away. It's something that you might want to try a little bit later in the process. You might want to then have a look at testing the A/B test between whether I do a direct response at this step or whether I do it a week later. And one thing to consider again is to make them responsive. So making them responsive in two ways. One, to make sure that they are mobile responsive and tablet responsive, as well as being desktop responsive, obviously, so that they're rendering in all of the different email providers for all devices, but then also ensuring that they're responsive based on a user interaction as well. So that there's something in the workflow that a user's doing that potentially maybe after the second email they become a purchased customer. They're actually a paying customer. We will ensure then that they're not getting, you know, four or five offers afterwards, you know, offering them different percentages off the product as well. if they've just purchased it. So you can have a look through in there what the lead nurturing process is as well. It's a simple cyclical process, starting with how we inform the customers, we educate them, we look to get them involved as much as possible. So ways that we can get them involved is potentially running, if it's a B2B type product, it could be running, like a product demo, potentially getting them to look at a few videos as well. Anything that we can do to get them a little bit more involved with the product. It might even be something like a free trial. We validate through them then as well, so they're using the product, they're finding if there's a need for the product, then we're converting them. Once we've got them into the conversion, the lead nurturing process then usually takes a bit of a different form, where it's trying to get them involved in as many assets of the product as possible to ensure that they're not churning, that you're keeping them alive, and then it essentially becomes, again, another cyclical process. Okay, so lead nurturing and CRM, as we've said before, it's so much cheaper to get money out of those existing customers than it is to acquire a new customer. So these are the guys that we really need to focus on and make sure that we have the plan of attack in place. The basic theory behind this is that you automatically send emails to existing customers who have shown a recent or renewed interest in the product. So these are customers that have, maybe they've just downloaded an ebook that you've put out, or maybe they're customers who have recently come back and interacted with the product in a way. So your marketing efforts should really focus on a select few of these and having a look at the real high quality customers that you think will increase those conversion rates, and then also on the flip side of that, decrease the opt-out and churning rates from this as well. So you can see through in there that I've put in there some available tools that we've got as well, having a look at things like Salesforce, which is used as a CRM for a lot of different purposes, having a look at actually controlling the whole relationship with those customers, having a look at all those different touch points, what emails they've received, what phone calls they've received from you as well. Something like Aloka or Marketo as well, which are more the marketing automation tools, where you can have a look at actually putting in a bit of a workflow based on particular behaviors of your customers, and the same with HubSpot there as well, which is an inbound marketing tool that you can potentially look to use as well. And that's something where you can actually look to change aspects of your website as well to make it based on what type of customers you have. So for example, one thing that HubSpot does is if somebody has maybe purchased downloaded a guide on how to do better social media, the next time they go to their website, the website will then be tailored to a messaging around how HubSpot can really help you with your social media marketing. So it's a really refined message, and having looked to really build that relationship on a really granular level. So here's an example of a lead and customer nurturing program that could take place. This is a really simple one. They're usually a little bit more complicated than this. This is one through Aloka. So what Aloka allows you to do is to create a simple workflow where the customers start up at the top, they go through and they get sent an email, and then you can have a look to change a few of the behaviors. You can set waiting times, delay times, and then set conditions up as well. So for this first one we have an issue invitation. That gets sent out. The ones who respond to that, they get sent through on directly down into the landing page. The ones who don't, they get wait 3 days. They get checked if they've opened the email. If they have opened the email, there's a waiting period for that to hopefully get them to go back in. During that point, you might want to look at potentially putting in another email around that as well. If they haven't opened the email, they get sent a reminder email then through in there as well to really push them over the line. So it's creating different results and different campaigns and different reactions based on what the customer is doing. So there's so many different things you can look to do with that as well. You can have a look at adding it around things like if they've completed a form, or if they've abandoned their shopping cart, for example, which is a great example that comes up time and time again. And you can look to set these all out conditionally to make sure that when you are reaching your customers, that you're reaching them with the right message that's really tailored to their need at that given time. So here's an example with Bronto of an abandoned cart workflow. This is a nice and simple one where you've got an API event where somebody has gone through and they've created a cart, the email address is attached to that, but then they've actually left and bounced off that page. The email then gets sent with the cart reminder. Then they have a look at the email activity over that, reminding them within 24 hours after reaching that node. And then if something doesn't happen on the back of that, it could be an opportunity to incentivize the customer to get them over the line. So this is a simple example of how a marketing automation flow would work with an abandoned cart. And again, it's another great way you can have a look at bringing those customers back. So one example that I spent a lot of time looking over at iStock and Getty Images as well, and we did a lot of work around marketing automation around the types of imagery that customers were looking at any given time. So what we were using Eloqua at this point, and we'd be able to have a look and see when a customer comes through, so we've got their email address, then having a look at the types of pages they were looking at, what they were searching for as well. If we found that they were constantly searching for something that was quite similar, it could be a really good opportunity then to send that type of data through to our sales team and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know that we've got this whole new range of, I'm not sure, maybe it's images from the Grammys or whatever it might be, to ensure that you're getting in front of them where they have that pain point. So it's a great opportunity then to really target that messaging once again. So that was something that we did quite a bit when I was at Getty. And one thing we're going to have a look at now, which relates to this as well, is around lead scoring. So lead scoring essentially looks at determining the best customers you need to target for A, to sale, and then B, potentially for upselling as well. And it's a great way if you've got a lot of leads that are coming through the door and you're not quite sure how to prioritize them for your sales team. Maybe you only have a small sales team with a lot of leads. It's a great way of being able to say, okay, well, in this particular example, we've got two bits of data. We've got profiling data and behavioral data. Here we can see that we've got in A1 is the optimal customer that we've got. So they're a real target fit. So they've got a lot of interest in the product. They've probably hit some key pages that you can set up. So generally how the heavy interest is construed is that they've hit either your checkout page, they've hit your product page, they've signed up. So they've hit the real target pages that you've set out, and then they're a target fit as well. So maybe they're a company that spends a certain amount of money, or they've got they're in a certain industry. Those are those more demographical bits of the behavior that you can look to target through in there as well. So they'd be your real optimal leads. So when you're lead scoring and they say, hey, these are the leads we want you to get to first, these are the ones that looks like you're going to have the most success with, as opposed to the guys having a look over in D4 where we have very little information about the customers, so it's very difficult to determine if they are the right fit or not, and they've got very low activity on the site as well. So it's very interesting as well to have a look at what bits of that data you prioritize. So for example, maybe you know that they're a target fit, but their activity's been really low. It's probably better for you to have a look at the guys you actually have a bit smaller information on than have heavy interest. So it's having a look at all of those and factoring out, testing those things, having a look at how they convert based on those lead scores that you've given, and then having a look at that's something that you need to change then as well. So I've got there that it can get very granular as well. So generally with how any of these systems work that you're doing this with, if they're any type of event tracking, how they'll work is that you can essentially see a user ID and it's attached to all of the behaviors of that customer. So if there's a certain behavior that you want to trigger, maybe it's a particular product page, you can look to segment your data based on those people who have hit that product page, and then you can tie that back into maybe some of the other data points that you have potentially if you've got more of that explicit data on the customer as well, their demographics, anything around their industry potentially as well. So there's some really granular things you can do with this type of lead scoring, and it really, again, is going to depend on, I guess, the balance between how many leads you have through and what your resources are like. Okay, so quickly having a look here at some of the retention channels we can look to use. So a lot of what we've been discussing so far is focused on email, but there's a lot of great ways that we can look to bring customers through the door outside of email as well. Obviously, there's the potential to do remarketing, and we can get very granular with our remarketing as well. Anyone who's done anything with AdWords around creating shared audiences would know that it's a really simple thing to set up some real conditions around the type of pages that are being visited and pages that you want to avoid sending a certain type of ad towards as well, and how long the delay is between that as well as 30, 60, 90 days. So there's some great opportunities there to be able to touch again with those customers, whether you're using the Google Display Network or whether you're using AdRoll or whatnot, to reaffirm that message to them and get in front of them again which will again form part of that whole retention strategy. Push notifications are becoming more and so the go-to thing, and all reports at the moment that I've been reading around 2015 trends and the way that marketing is heading is that push notifications are going to be one of the real big channels, particularly around retention marketing for 2015. So essentially that's having a look at generally behavioral again, but it can also be looked to just to a blanket wide type of push, but having a look at putting a message right in front of those smartphone users to get them to create and to perform a certain action within the application. SMS is one that comes up time and time again. I know when I was working in the online betting industry that this was one that we used with great success as well. We were able to get a message out to a particular group of customers straight away. You generally get a lot better cut through with your SMS than you do with your email, although you can also find that your churn rates are a lot higher and that the engagement rates can really vary again depending on industry as well. Your website, of course, is one that you can use, and especially if you're using something like a HubSpot as well, which allows you to dynamically change the content that's being served to customers. And then, of course, the good old phone. So that's probably the most important one, and the key one that you should be looking to use, especially when you're getting started, when you've got those customers through, is if you found that you've got some real key target customers who haven't converted just of yet, and you've got that information on them to be able to call them, it's going to be a great opportunity to upsell them via the phone. Okay, so the last thing we're going to be having a look at today is determining marketing attribution as well. So essentially what we're looking at through in there is what channel worked best for me. So typically, as I'm sure a few of us have seen, that if we're having a look at any type of attribution through Google Analytics, or we're having a look at any other type of analytics tool as well, generally attribution is given to the last interaction, the last click on of a particular marketing channel. But as I've said here, a single touch model is like giving the gold medal to only the first or the last swimmer in a relay. So these single touch models, that generally people will start with those, and I'd say still the large majority of businesses are using these interaction models, generally because they don't know a lot of the times that these other attribution models are available. And it's a really important thing to see because there's such a fluctuation in the attribution between a last click and a first click, but then also having a look at some more multi-attribution channels as well. So it's really important to make sure that we're factoring in all of the different powers that are playing part at any given time with this. So starting out through in here, this is an example of a typical channel attribution where we've got a starter, players, and a closer. So in this particular example, display advertising was the starter. So as we know, display advertising is usually a great way of being able to build brand awareness. It generally doesn't result in a direct response type result where people are clicking through directly and leading to a conversion. Usually takes a little bit more time for that to come through. So then following from that, we've got natural search, and these are really the players. So this is where potentially a user's looked to maybe Google more about a particular product. Maybe it's directly your brand, or maybe it's something a bit outside that. Maybe they're looking for a certain type of solution. Potentially, maybe let's use an example. They're looking for running shoes. So they're seeing your ad in the display, and they think, oh, well, there's some great running shoes there. They look of a good quality and price. Next thing I want to do is see what running shoes are best for me. Potentially, you might have written an article that relates around that, and then they've read that article on your website. So this becomes part of that factor as well. This is where you're more being that thought leader. And again, with social as well, if you then look to push something on social and have come through from social, whether through to a product page or to a blog post as well, it's all paying part of that attribution. So that when time comes to actually put in that order, they're looking for that direct response. They've come through, they've written in either your brand name or maybe something really specific around with the product that they want. They've come through, they've clicked on that paid search order. It's a direct response, and it's directly led to the conversion. So if you have a look at that, it starts to make sense on why customer attribution is so difficult, because models require so much impression conversion data from all of your channels. There's so many different things to play into the way that attribution ends up being what it is. And tagging is so important in all of those different steps, so you might be missing a lot of those steps along the way as well. So, some of the larger companies that are doing this quite well will actually go beyond what they're doing online and being able to tie back what a customer is doing potentially offline. It could be even something as granular as, going into a change room and trying something on, or purchasing something within store, tying back that data through into their analytics suite, and then being able to attribute different weightings to each channel based on that. So we're going to have a look now at some of the different attribution models and how these different attribution models really differ in what they offer. So the main ones that we've got through in here, and these are the ones that get pulled from your Google Analytics account. If you want to have a look, you can go through into conversions and into channel attribution, and these are the ones that you can set up from a get-go. So the first one we're having through in there is last interaction. This is the one that we generally will start with, and having a look at what that last interaction was, whether it's an AdWords channel or an organic channel or whatnot. Then we've got the last non-direct interaction. So a lot of the time, a lot of marketers these days consider that if a customer is directly going to the site to complete that purchase process, that you've already won them over with the other marketing channels that have been put in place. So the last non-direct interaction is becoming more so important a lot of the time in having a look at what were the key channels to get a customer over the line. Last AdWords click is another one as well. First interaction, so the first time that they've been associated with your product. So first interaction is really important, particularly when you're first starting out, to have a look at what channel it was that got a customer A, knowing about you, but then B, led to them actually becoming a purchaser. Linear is one where we have a look at spreading the attribution simply evenly between the channels. So it would be, if you have 5 channels, it would be 20% on each of the channels that conversion would be attributed to. Time decay is an interesting one where it has a look at essentially the last couple of channels get weighted more heavily because they're the ones that led to that actual that purchase or that end conversion goal. So they are actually held with more weight than the other ones, and that just it continues over time. And then there's the position-based attribution model as well. So essentially what that has a look at is a higher weight between your first and last click attribution, and then it will weigh in evenly all of the attributions through in the middle, through in there. So what I've put through in here is a little bit of mock data where we're having a look at a real-life example of where our channels and the attribution for those channels, so this is having a look at revenue dollars, really fluctuates between the different models that we're using. So you can see through in there that, especially with the first channel we're having a look at, which is display marketing, the last interaction value versus the first interaction value is so different. So what essentially this is telling us is that although for this particular example the display wasn't maybe as viable as some of the other channels in getting a customer to purchase right there and then as a direct response, it played a massive part in actually getting them aware of the brand and engage with the brand and the product at the first step, at that first interaction. And then you can see how that differs then again from a linear value where it was weighed out evenly across all of the different channels that were put into power. So the more you play with these, the more that you'll begin to understand that, what you can see as being, your return of investment for a marketing channel, or the conversion rates for a particular marketing channel that you might just see, in your initial views in Google Analytics or Omniture or Kissmetrics or whatever you're using, that they look like they're finite and they're complete. However, when you can see them through here, you can start to work out that there's a lot of different factors that can potentially come into place when considering out what is the most appropriate channels for us and what are the more viable channels for us as well. So, this plays a great part in then being able to determine which of these channels we want to keep. Are they playing a key role in getting somebody over the line with a customer as well? So ultimately what we're trying to do with our attribution models is tie back the weight of each of the steps on the transition of behaviors of a particular customer. So this is an example which is more, it's a W-shaped model, so it's having a look at an even weight between the 3 key parts. being the visit, so when they're first getting to the website, gets 30%. When they're converting into a lead, so when maybe you're getting the email address of that particular customer, so what channel brought upon that particular conversion, and then the opportunity as well. So at what channel did they actually go in to become an actual purchasing customer? And it's then weighting those ones out evenly and saying these all played a really key part in getting that customer over the line, and they really were key cogs in that whole customer journey. So some other considerations you want to consider, having a look at this as well, is branded versus generic search. So this is another one where we're talking about if somebody is searching for your brand directly, we might want to weigh that a little bit less than if somebody's searching particularly just for a product. And the reason behind that is we might think that if they're searching branded, it means that we've already won them over with one of the other steps that we've put into play. Again, with direct, we want to consider whether we want to include that as a step or not. More and more people are removing the direct from their attribution and saying that, look, it's not really paying that part, it's the steps before. And the direct is just a result of the good marketing that's come before that. Another thing to consider is the time and the engagement weighting as well. So this is something that you can set up in analytics. If you go into the attribution, you can have a go at setting up a actual custom attribution cycle. And one thing that you can have a look through in there is the time and the engagement of each of those particular channels as well. So if you're finding that maybe you're working on a linear model where you had 5 different steps, and maybe it was email, social media, display, paid search, organic search, but you're finding with that the social media step that the customers on there, although they were clicking onto the site and they were playing a part in that attribution, they were actually bouncing from that straight away. So you might want to consider then that 20% that you were attributing to that might want to be less because they were actually not an engaged customer through at that point. So they're all little things that you'll need to consider based on what you think is working and what not, and what your business goals are as well. Another thing to consider is your starting point. So I'm sure a lot of people will be starting on a real blank canvas, which essentially will be a last click attribution. So this is something to consider as well, and to think, what can I do from an early stage to start testing out and determining what my attribution should be for each of my particular channels. So generally, as a good starting point, it's good to start out with a linear type start to see how each of the different channels is playing a part, having a look at how that's determined, and then potentially looking at adding some weighting behind each of the different steps when you're finding that interaction is decreasing, or that branded search or direct is playing a big part. So linear's being thrown out a little bit there as well. And again, there's more templates in the Google Solutions gallery for this as well, so it's a good place to start to have a look at potentially setting up some attribution around things like newsletter signups and just subscribers to newsletters as well. So it's one to consider as well for this. Cool. So to finish up here today, I just wanted to put through a real quick digital analytics business checklist to ensure that everything that we've touched upon today can be then let out and practiced, so that you can go forward and start to apply a few of these things in your business. So what we're having a look through in here is tag management, ensuring that every bit of our marketing channels that they're all being tracked, whether we're using UTM tags on them or we're using click tags if we're doing things through the display network, just ensuring that everything that we've got is being tracked so that we can properly attribute them in the right circumstances. That we've got an analytics tool in place, whether we're using Google Analytics or we're using KISS metrics, where we can get a little bit more granular and have a look at more user behavior stats as well, or any of the other tools available out there, whether we're looking at Clicky or Omniture. There's a range of tools, just making sure that we put a tool in place and that we're setting out with it. We've got our conversion point set up as well. We've determined what are the key conversion metrics that we're going to be having a look at. We've got our campaigns tagged. Conversion funnels have been modeled. This is again around those R metrics, the pirate metrics of Dave McClure, so making sure that each of those has been modeled around what suits our business's goals, and we're having a look at how the conversion rates are worked out through each of those. A/B testing, ensuring that we're always testing, whether we're testing in-page with things like Optimizely, or we're running landing page tests with Unbounce, or whether we're doing email testing as well. We've got some lead nurturing in place, where we're actually putting a customer through a bit of a life cycle or a drip program.
Attribution modeling is done as well, so that we're looking at things from a bit more of a multi-click perspective as opposed to a single click. That everybody's going to log in as well, of course. That's such an important thing to make sure that you're able to pass on data from if you've got a particular web analytics team, or if you're working if you want to pass that on to marketing or through to your tech team, and then also to automate your reporting where possible. So especially if you're a time poor team and you might not have a lot of people to run with, that you're automating the key parts of your data that you need to get out. And then if there's particular, maybe outliers in that data, that you're going back and having a look through your accounts and working out what you need to go through and fix, doing your best to connect offline and online data as well. So potentially, if you're running an offline campaign, you might want to think of what you can do to ensure that the data, the customers coming through from those offline channels, that you're able to determine that they've come from those channels. So that could be something as simple as maybe a promo code on those particular offline channels. You could maybe even set up a unique URL for some of those offline channels. You could even set up its own microsite. So having to think of the different ways that you're able to connect that data and track where each of the steps are coming from. The customer lifetime value then will play a part of all of this as well, starting to determine, once we look at our churn rates versus our revenue and our repeat transaction, what we can determine in terms of what our lifetime value would be and what we're looking to spend to acquire a customer, and then having a look ultimately at the end goal, which is automating as much of this as we can. So some tools to use to get started with all of this. I've put in here some useful analytics tools with Optimizely, which we've touched on before as an A/B test tool. Crazy Egg, something that we use a lot here at LawPath, which is essentially, it works as a heat mapping type tool. It's a great way of getting started and having a look at how far your users are scrolling on any particular page, where they're clicking on. Are there opportunities to link to parts of the page that they're clicking on, or are you serving maybe too much information that people aren't actually scrolling through to get? GhostRec is a really cool one as well, that's used as a user experience test tool, where it records through a user through their steps and their cycle on a page, and then you have records of that as well, that you can go back and have a look at how a user is interacting with your website and engaging with your website, and is it counterintuitive to what you had hypothesized. Web analytics tools as well. Google Analytics, of course, would be the place to start, as it's the free tool. It's the one that has the most written about it, but there's some other great tools in there as well. With Kissmetrics is a great one, where you're looking to tie back user information, where you can get much more granular details about a particular user. Clicky is another great one as well, similar to Analytics and Omniture. It's one of the more enterprise type tools that are available, where you can really start to have a look at all those parts of the automation process as well. Some other useful tools to have a look at as well. Keen.io is one that we use at LawPath a bit, and it really helps us in terms of being able to create essentially drag-drop queries on a lot of this event-based analytics that we have. So having a look at all of the different events that we have on a user, being able to tie them back around some common groupings, and have a look at that in a nice visual way as well. SumoMe is a great tool to use to have a look at getting potentially more users as well, more email subscribers. It's a simple JavaScript you can attach to your page to set up an overlay, or you can set up a simple bar as well. Some other useful tools that you want to have a look at if we're considering things like search engine optimization, looking at things like webmaster tools. Moz is a great way of then having a look at how your keywords are ranking, and it can also tie back into your analytics. Even something as simple as a site search and knowing your way around those more advanced searches in Google. Xenia Link Sleuth is a great way of being able to have a look at where you're having broken links on your pages as well, and having a look at if you've got any type of crawling issues, if you've got any duplicate page titles, duplicate meta descriptions. And for social, I think Mention's one of the best tools that you can use in terms of having a look at how often your brand is being mentioned and where it's being mentioned. Facebook Insights these days provides a really good suite of information as well. I know when I was first working through my process of developing Facebook pages and creating affiliate content for Facebook pages, that the insights provided really gave me a great stepping stone to determine, at what points people were actually looking on the pages, and what type of content they were really engaging with as well. Okay, well, thank you very much, guys. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you've learned something as well. If you've got any questions now, feel free to type them in, and I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. We have a question from Susan. Thank you, Susan. She's asking implicit versus explicit. How we combine these two data to come out with a better idea of our business direction?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that really is an important one as well. So, I mean, we all know, I think, from what I've found personally, that implicit data is probably the most essential part of data that you're going to be able to grab from your website, where you can actually have a look really at the behavioral aspects of each of your users and tie them back to potentially marketing to them in a different way. And once you've got that implicit type of data, you then, again, of course, want to tie that back in with your explicit data, where you've got things around their demographics, where they've got their age and their postcode and whatnot as well. And you can really look to build up things like it might be if you were, for example, in an area-specific business, and you know that you want to target people in this particular postcode. Maybe you've got an offer that's running in that postcode. You might then want to have a look at your implicit data then for that postcode as well, and have a look at people who have opened an email from you in the last 60 days versus the ones who haven't, and look to potentially target the type of messaging that you're giving those customers in a different way as well. So it's really important that you're looking to tie up those two, both implicit and explicit data wherever possible. And the other one to have a look at through in there as well, once you start to get a bit more granular, is having a look at more interaction data as well, which again is implicit data, but having a look at things like what pages people are visiting, and maybe if they went to a particular page on your website as well.